You've worked hard today, too. At the end of a complicated day, a time for the mind to quietly rest. Welcome to Slow Night Sleepy Stories. Tonight, shall we briefly set aside the worries of our dizzying reality and walk together among sentences written long ago? Lean back comfortably, close your eyes, and listen to my voice. Someone digs up a perfectly good bean field chasing a golden hope buried underground, while someone else beside them faces the bleak autumn night wind. The piece we will share on Slow Night Sleepy Stories is The Gold-Digging Bean Patch, written by Kim Yu-jeong in 1935. We invite you into the bittersweet and funny story of people who dreamed of striking it rich in the midst of a harsh life. Plucking Gold in a Bean Patch, 1935. Author Kim Yu-jeong. Deep down underground, it is always gloomy. The weary carbide lamp flickers with a lifeless bluish hue. Unlike the night, it was extremely dim during the day. A narrow pit tightly blocked on all sides by walls of yellow dirt. It is chillingly eerie, exactly like the inside of a tomb. Cold silence, a damp earthy smell, and a dreadful chill are all that fill the space. The pickaxe relentlessly tears into the dirt, striking down fiercely, thud, thud, thud. Only such dull sounds echo, but occasionally, with a rustle, the wall crumbles. Yeong-sik stops working, pulls up his sleeve, and wipes the sweat from his face. It was absurd wondering when this damned gold vein would ever be caught. He grabs a handful of dirt, brings it right under his nose, and sifts through it thoroughly with his fingers. The waste rock clearly seemed to have changed a bit, but the barren rock hadn't completely cleared away either. They say the gold comes only when there's yellowish waste rock, so why wasn't it coming out? He picks up the pickaxe again. Kneeling on the ground with his rear raised high, he huffs and puffs. He swings the pickaxe down blindly. Water seeps from the floor, soaking his knees completely. Drops of dirt fall from the ceiling of the pit and roll down the back of his neck. Sometimes, a piece of the upper wall falls, striking his back with a thwack and shattering. Yet, he doesn't even blink an eye. He had ruined a whole bean patch just to dig for gold. Spurred by spite, he is now in a frantic state, working as if his life depends on it, with his eyes rolling back. Spitting into his palms, he grips the pickaxe handle tightly and knows no rest. Behind his back, a scratching sound of dirt rings out, scrape, scrape. It seems he still hasn't cleared all the waste rock. Is this bastard working or just playing around? My insides are burning to a crisp, yet how can he be so thick-skinned and relaxed? Yeong-sik turns his head with a murderous glare. He glares at Su-jae without a word. Only then does Su-jae sluggishly load the dirt into his A-frame basket, carry it on his back, and climb up the ladder. The wall shudders as if the pit is giving way. Dirt crumbles down. In the past, his hair would have stood on end at the thought of dying a meaningless death here without ever having a wife. But now, he almost wished for it. If he could be buried under a pile of dirt alongside that bastard Su-jae and die together, that would actually be better. He hated him so very much. Seduced by this guy's instigation, he had completely ruined an innocent bean patch. Not only that, everything was a disaster. He hadn't even weeded the rice paddies for the third time. The weeds on the paddy ridges have grown tall and are scattered wildly. Sensing this, the landlord was furious. Stamping his feet, he told him not to even think about farming from next year on. And no matter how much he digs the ground, there is no end in sight. By now, it must be well over 5 fathoms deep. He hesitates blankly, wondering whether it would be right to dig deeper or push northward. He is a complete novice when it comes to gold mining. Up until now, he had been working under Su-jae's direction, and he would have to continue doing so to strike gold. But he refuses to do such a degrading thing anymore. "Come here and dig this," he commanded this with an awkward show of authority. Then, he stands up, dusts off his hands, and steps back. Su-jae complied without a word of complaint. As instructed, he kneels on the ground, scrapes out the loose waste rock along the wall, and begins to dig again. Yeong-sik shoulders the remaining waste rock that was left uncleared. Stumbling with the large walking stick, he climbs up the ladder. Just as he exits the pit entrance and is about to dump the dirt onto the waste pile, "Why are you digging again? Have you all gone crazy?" He came face to face with the overseer Kam, down from the mountain. Startled and dazed, he just stood there blankly. What kind of abuse was he going to hear today? I told you to stop, so why are you digging again? The overseer yelled, jabbing the back of Yeong-sik's A-frame basket sharply with his cane. This is a field meant to be plowed and eaten from, not for you to bury yourselves in dirt, you lunatics. What gold is going to come out of a bean patch that you're acting up like this? He screamed, veins popping in his neck. If the field was ruined, it would be his own fault for managing it poorly. Even though he came every day, threw a fit, and forbade them, the next day he'd find them still digging. You better fill this pit back up today, or else you'll be going to prison straight away tomorrow. He was so overcome with emotion that his words wouldn't come out right, and he stuttered. His fists shook furiously at his sides, looking as though they would fly out at any moment. We'll just try for today and then stop. Yeong-sik managed to say a single word, his face turning red. Then he begged blindly. The overseer ignored him and walked away. Yeong-sik stared blankly at his retreating back. But looking at the face of the bean patch, his heart broke with profound sorrow. Holes were gaping everywhere on a perfectly good field. Piles of waste rock were heaped up haphazardly. It looked as eerie and incredibly desolate as a public cemetery hit by a landslide. The bean plants, which had been doing so well, were mostly crushed under the piles of waste rock, and only a few survivors left here and there fluttered their heads. Seeing that sight was almost worse than watching one's own child die. It was a scene too painful to bear. The farmland will surely be entirely taken away. But on Earth, how was he going to come up with the 2.5 bags of rice for this year's field rent? Moreover, since he ruined the field, he might even go to prison. When Yeong-sik came back inside the pit, his comrade was sitting on the ground resting. He was puffing away on a cigarette with nonchalant indifference. When are we going to hit the vein? It'll come out gradually now. Coming out now, you say? Yeong-sik sneered and scoffed, and a little later, you son of a bitch. He picked up a clod of dirt and smashed it down on his head. Su-jae cried and collapsed face down. Then he sprang up. Grabbing a pickaxe that caught his eye, he lunged immediately. But the difference in strength was too great. He bounced off a burly forearm and fell against the wall with a thud. At that moment, he saw the pickaxe he had lost flying straight toward the crown of his head. He sharply turned his head. The pickaxe struck the dirt wall with a thwack and came back out. Just hearing Su-jae's name made Yeong-sik grind his teeth. He had clearly been completely duped. Originally, Yeong-sik had no experience with gold mining, and no interest in it either. He just squatted in the furrows, sweating and working diligently. This year, the beans had grown unexpectedly well, giving him some peace of mind. One day, as he was weeding alone, "Hey there, isn't it hot? Take a break." He looked up to see Su-jae. He never farmed and only wandered around gold mines, but for whatever reason, he was here, grinning from ear to ear. Wondering if he had caught a lucky break, Yeong-sik asked, "Did you make a lot of money? Give me some." "Of course I did. Ate as much as I wanted, spent as much as I wanted." With a face flushed with alcohol, he babbled enthusiastically. Then, squatting at the edge of the field, he spewed nonsense for a long while before saying, "Hey, don't you want to make some money? There's gold buried in this field, gold." "What?" Yeong-sik replied. "Right over this mountain, in the large valley, there's a mine. It's a bonanza, employing over 300 miners, and the gold produced daily exceeds 79. In terms of money, that's 7,001. That vein, he claimed, pierced through the waist of the large mountain and extended right into this bean patch. If the two of them dug, they'd hit the vein in less than 10 days, and they would extract at least 3 or 4 don of gold a day. First of all, think of how much even 300,001 is. If you bought cows, wouldn't that be 10,000 of them? But Yeong-sik did not listen carefully. Gold mining is like jumping with a knife in your mouth. If it goes well, great, but if not, you just ruin your life. He had heard things like this before. The next day, Su-jae came again, coaxed him, and left. The third time, he visited the house, boldly bringing a bottle of macchioli and putting on airs. He had come again, restless and eager. Sitting on the dirt porch, he stared blankly at the dinner table and impudently babbled that millet gruel ruins the body, that a worker needs to eat heartily, and that while others are making a fuss buying paddies and fields, was he just going to live like this and die? "Ma'am, please let us drink this." and only then did he hand the liquor bottle to Yeong-sik's wife. They sat around the dining table and drank merrily. After a few glasses went down, Yeong-sik's thoughts also somewhat shifted. Indeed, it was wiser to dig for gold than to suffer for a year just to get a few bags of beans. If he just dug well for one day, it would be vastly more profitable than the harvest he put effort into all year. Because of the 7-1, he went into debt for fertilizer, wages, and other debts when spring arrived this year. He was being squeezed day by day. Rather than living such a petty life, a real man ought to give it a try, come what may. Let's dig starting tomorrow. If we only have money, those trivial beans. When Su-jae anxiously and repeatedly pestered him, he readily agreed. Let's do it. Damn it. If it doesn't work, we'll just stop. However, it was only because his wife, who was drinking gruel behind him, poked his ribs. Otherwise, he might have hesitated a bit. The wife had her own quick calculations. Nowadays, gold mining ruled the world. If they clumsily stuck only to farming, they would ultimately become nothing more than beggars. Soon enough, mountains, rice paddies, and fields alike would all be pierced, overturned, and thrown into chaos by the hands of gold prospectors. What would they dig up to eat then? Just look. As if they had made a pact, the farm hands would stop working and suddenly run off to the gold mines. The village is in an uproar, saying they can't farm this year because there are no workers. Even the tenant farmers would throw away their hoes and run to the riverbanks and streams to pan for gold. And yet, a few days later, wouldn't they be strutting around in tabby shoes and fine cotton, showing off? The wife had never even dreamed that gold would come from the bean patch. She was both surprised and delighted. Just the thought of, this year I'll really get to eat that damned pollack I've only been drooling over, made her so thrilled her chest felt full. She was incredibly envious of the woman from Yangon in the back house, who strolled leisurely in the white rubber shoes her husband had bought her thanks to gold mining. If gold poured out for her too, she would wear white rubber shoes and put powder on her face. Let's do it then. If we just do as that gentleman says, surely it will go well. She had incited her bewildered husband sitting there like this. As soon as dawn broke, they gathered at the bean patch. Su-jae muttered to this side and muttered to that side, as if chanting an incantation. He bustled about, going here and there. In his own way, he was trying to estimate the vein lying underground. After wandering around the field for a while, he stopped dead in a corner near the mountain, pointed his finger, and explained. A great vein naturally runs along the mountain range. Since this vein is a bonanza, it must surely lie aslant toward this direction. So, his proposal was to start digging from here. Yeong-sik couldn't understand what that meant. But since Su-jae was supposedly a master at gold mining, he firmly believed that if he just followed his words, a pile of gold would undoubtedly appear. Without a word, he forcefully drove his shovel into the designated spot and began to dig. Gold was gold, but the beans he had painstakingly grown were also beans. The fully grown, tall and handsome plants were being crushed at the tip of the shovel and buried in dirt. Seeing that hurt his heart quite a bit. When feelings of sorrow surged, he would occasionally put down his shovel, bend his waist, and brush the dirt off the bean leaves. Oh man, what's the use of looking at that so pathetically? I said let's dig for gold. No, my back just hurts a bit. Getting scolded made him feel a bit sheepish. True, if the gold just burst forth, a bean patch like this was nothing. He could turn this field into a rice paddy. He closed his eyes and haphazardly tossed the dirt from his shovel right over the bean leaves. Just dig the earth honestly and make a living. What kind of madness is this? The village elder visited frequently, saying harsh words. They had already drilled 3 holes in the field, and they were continuing to drill. Whether it was gold or some curse, because of it, the farmer was ruined. This was surely a sign that the world was going to end. Drilling holes in that precious field and acting like this, would he end up intact? Overcome with anger, the elder couldn't help but raise his cane and point his finger. You'll be struck by lightning, struck by lightning. Don't worry. Who asked you? Yeong-sik shot back bluntly every time. In a fit of temper, he tossed the dirt carelessly, spat, and went into the pit. But a corner of his mind was always heavy. In search of the vein, he had completely turned the bean patch upside down. and it was still completely dark as to when the vein would appear. He couldn't weed the rice paddy, couldn't check the water, and didn't even know what had become of the rice plants. At night, unable to sleep, he lay wide awake, burning with anxiety. Su-jae remained the same, showing no signs of discouragement. He crouched on the ground, leisurely and steadily digging the dirt. "Will the vein really appear?" Yeong-sik, parched with anxiety, asked. "If it doesn't come out this time, you can cut my throat." Su-jae firmly assured without hesitation and stood resolute. Seeing this, Yeong-sik felt his mind ease a little. Why would that guy go through this hardship for nothing if there was no gold? Gold would definitely appear. Only then did the despair of wanting to quit, thinking the losses already incurred couldn't be helped, vanish on its own, and he found himself clenching his fists once again. The night was pitch black. From somewhere, a pack of dogs barked loudly. The husband came down from the mountain covered in mud. Dejected and unable to properly control his body, he slumped limply onto the warm spot of the floor. Seeing this sight, the wife lost her energy once again. It was a failure today as well. She had gone out boasting that they would buy a house when they struck gold, but it had all been for nothing. Now, utterly disheartened, she lacked even the courage to show her face outside. She brought dinner to her husband and looked at him pitifully. "Now we've even eaten all the borrowed food. I'm going to hold a mountain spirit ritual at dawn, so go borrow some just one more time." He didn't reply to what she was actually saying, only giving a sluggish, detached order before gently closing his eyes as he lay there. "We don't even have enough for gruel. What mountain spirit ritual?" "I don't want to hear it, you wicked bitch." At this shout, the wife flinched and fell silent. Lately, her husband, who threw fits for no reason without warning, was also pathetic. Like a madman, he didn't sleep at night, only yelled loudly and out. He tried to lunge at people. Even when their young child cried a little, he caused an uproar, telling her to throw the brat out. Since he didn't eat dinner, she just cleared it away. Unable to disobey her husband's order, she couldn't avoid going to the Yeongun woman again. They had been borrowing food continuously without paying it back, so it was an embarrassing situation, wondering with what face she could open her mouth to ask again. After agonizing over it, she threw away whatever remaining shame she had and went to visit once more. But when she faced them and opened her mouth, "We're holding a mountain spirit ritual tomorrow, so we need some rice." Her face burned as if struck by a bonfire. However, they were quite kind-hearted people. "Of course, if the mountain spirit turns away, even your gruel will go bad," her husband responded with a gentle smile. Since he was a man who had been thoroughly worn out in the gold mines for a long time, he was quite wise to such matters. Scooping out 5 dough of rice himself, he said, "If you weren't going to hold a mountain spirit ritual, that's one thing, but if you're going to, you must do it with utmost sincerity. The mountain spirit gets angry easily." He even taught her the secret method before sending her off. Coming out with the rice in her hands, Yeong-sik's wife turned red again, overwhelmed by apologetic feelings rather than gratitude, and she was truly, intensely envious of how that couple lived. The Yeongun woman's husband roamed the gold mines every day, digging through the piles of waste rock and picking up traces of gold. If he ground them on a stone all day, on a lucky day he'd make 2 or 3 won, and even on a bad day, he'd consistently earn 70 or 80 john every day. With that, they buy rice, cut fabrics, make rice cakes, lend money at high interest. But why were they always in this state? Just thinking about it made her chest feel tight, and heavy sighs poured out continuously. The wife returned home and soaked the rice for the rice cakes. What would they make gruel with tomorrow? Crouched in the cold upper part of the room, she cast a sharp sideways glare at her husband sprawled on the opposite side. Other people wander around and pick up gold so well, but that brute ruined his entire field and couldn't even pick up a single grain of gold. Ugh, a worthless man. Unconsciously, shallow sighs burst from her twice in a row. Late at night, the couple came out to make the rice cakes. The husband pounded it in the mortar, thump, thump. However, they had no sieve. The wife's legs burned as she ran around the village trying to borrow one. "Why are you sitting like this? Light the fire." Her husband, who sat blankly as if his soul had left while pounding the rice cakes, looked detestable. She was worrying herself sick this way and that. So what was he thinking, sitting there like that? Chopping dry branches roughly with a sickle and throwing them to him, the wife silently fumed. Only after the rooster crowed for the second time were the rice cakes done. The wife carried the steamer on her head, and the husband tucked a straw mat under his arm. Then they climbed the pitch-black mountain path. After climbing the steep path for some time, the bean patch appeared. It was a blocked-off place surrounded by towering black mountains in the front. Along the edges, Zelkova and jujube trees let their hair down. Just before reaching the head of the field, the husband stopped and looked back at his wife behind him. "Hand it over, and you stand still right here." Receiving the steamer and hugging it with one arm, he stepped up into the bean patch alone. Everything piled up in front of him were dirt mounds, and just as he was about to turn around the dirt mound, he must have kicked a stone. His body wobbled, about to fall, and his wife, terrified, rushed up to support him. "Why did you come up to bring bad luck, you wicked bitch?" Regaining his balance, the sadist husband shouted loudly and slapped his wife's cheek. Things were already bad enough to die, and now this woman brings bad omens. Grumbling disapprovingly, he entered the field. He laid the mat in the middle of the field and placed the steamer on it. Then, standing in front of the steamer, he respectfully and sincerely gave 2 large bows. "Please save us. If the mountain spirit does not help us, we have no choice but to die." He put his hands together and prayed like this. Watching this sight, the wife's venom rose sharply. Playing at gold mining and not digging up a single grain of gold, his habits were only getting worse. He didn't have it before, but lately he developed a terrible habit of hitting her at the slightest provocation. Was he told to dig for gold or to slap cheeks? "I beg, for my sake, please don't let that damned gold come out." Out of spite from being slapped, she cursed him freely in her mind. Indeed, it turned out exactly as the wife had cursed. Even after well over 10 days, there was absolutely no word from the mountain spirit. Day and night, the husband was buried in the pit, his eyes rolled back. Whenever he occasionally came down to the house, his face was gaunt, his shoulders drooped, and he looked almost like an invalid. Then, in silence, he would hurl his large frame onto the heated floor with a thud. "Damn it all, I wish I were dead." Or he would sigh like this. The wife left the house, carrying lunch in a gourd bowl on her head. The nursing baby patted her back, giggling happily. She was completely sick of even thinking about white rubber shoes and Pollack now. She had reached the point where sour water rose in her mouth just hearing the word gold. Never mind all that. It would be good enough if they weren't being chased for the borrowed food they had eaten. Autumn fell yellow over the rice paddies and fields. The farmers had joyful faces and shared cheerful jokes when they met each other, but her husband had only ruined an innocent field and hadn't even managed the rice paddy. So what was he to harvest, and what was he to enjoy this autumn? Ashamed of the villagers' gazes, she took a detour along the mountain path. Stepping out of the pine forest and looking far outside, she saw that both of them were out. It seemed they had fought again today. One sat on a dirt mound over here, and the other sat on one over there. Ignoring each other, they just puffed hard on their cigarettes. "Have some lunch." Setting the gourd bowl down in front of her husband, she quietly observed his mood. The husband's jacket was torn, and he had scratches on his face. He sat silently, staring at the distant mountains with his sleeves rolled up. Su-jae looked as if he had been buried in dirt and pulled out, not to mention his face. Even inside his ears were covered in dirt. A blood scab had dried under his nose, and a little blood was still trickling down. Seeing Yeong-sik's wife, he looked embarrassed. Turning his head and dropping it sideways, he only smacked his lips. "I told you to dig for gold, so are you just going to bleed day and night? While I'm anxious and my insides are burning from being chased by debt, what kind of luxury is this madness?" Displeased, the wife narrowed her eyes. "When are you going to pay back what we borrowed for the mountain spirit ritual?" She twisted the end of her sentence toward her sullen husband. But her husband didn't twitch a single eyebrow. This time, raising her tone a bit, "Why did you tell me to borrow it when you couldn't even pay it back?" It was practically a scolding. These words struck the husband's rage, which had not yet subsided. He sprang up, made a hard fist, and smacked his wife's head hard enough to make it ring. "You flippant bitch." She didn't know about anything else, but the fist made her dizzy. If she rushed in foolishly, her head would be crushed. Suppressing her resentment and trembling, the wife eventually untied the baby on her back. She pushed D and threw the baby straight at her husband, and the baby let out a gasp. "Cataract!" Then the wife turned around and muttered to herself, "What kind of idiot digs for gold in a bean patch?" She mocked sarcastically. "What, you bitch?" Her husband immediately lunged at her and gave her another solid punch to the cheek. Ordinarily, he might have comforted her since she was his wife, but this one just kept provoking his anger. "Bah, damn it, it's all or nothing now. I'm not living with you. Leave today." He violently shoved his wife aside onto the paddy ridge and kicked her hard in the ribs. The wife opened her mouth with a gasp. "When was it that you poked my ribs telling me to do it, you family-ruining bitch?" And he kicked her hard again, followed by another hard kick. Watching this spectacle, Su-jae grew anxious. He guessed that the anger would soon sneakily shift back to him. If he got caught now, he would die. He staggered around and, at some point, slipped away little by little into the pit. The sunlight gave off a warm autumn fragrance. Having lost their owner, the beans rolled their heavy fruits roundly in the dirt. From the foot of the opposite mountain came the song of farmers rejoicing as they harvested the rice. "It burst! It burst!" Su-jae rushed out of the pit entrance with his eyes wide, shouting. In his hand, he tightly gripped a handful of dirt. Yeong-sik paused. "What?" "I found the gold vein, the gold vein." Leaving behind a single cry of "Yes!" Yeong-sik dashed towards Su-jae like an arrow. He hastily took the dirt and sifted through it thoroughly. Sure enough, it was a reddish-yellow dirt he hadn't seen before. Tears welled up in his eyes. "Is this the main vein?" "Of course, this is the rich vein. You can easily get about 5 don per bag." More than joy, Yeong-sik was suddenly choked up first. He didn't know whether he should laugh or cry. He just stared blankly at Su-jae's face with his mouth half open. "Come here. He says this is gold." At last, the husband called his wife, and as she approached hesitantly, saying, "What did I tell you? I told you to try it," she seemed all the more endearing. He wiped away his wife's tears with his thumb and then skipped into the pit. "There's gold in that dirt, right?" Just as Yeong-sik's wife was so overjoyed that she was imagining Palak and a grand house with a tiled roof, Su-jae breezily replied, "Yes, it yields 51 a sack," he answered, while thinking to himself that tonight he would surely, absolutely, definitely run away. A lie cannot last long. Before he is exposed and his bones are crushed to pieces, running far away would be the best plan. That is all for the story I have prepared for tonight. It is a night where Su-jae's desperate lie and the Yeong-sik couple's vain joy leave a strange, lingering resonance. Today, were you perhaps also exhausted from chasing after something unattainable? I hope these dusty stories from an old bookshelf have brought a little comfort to the end of your weary day. Let us leave tomorrow's worries for after tomorrow's sun rises, and now it is time to sleep peacefully. I will return with the next story. Good night.